I've been reborn 8 times to save the woman I love most, Claire. But every time, she died to save me. When I was drowning, she pushed me ashore, but was eventually swept away by the waves. Under the blade, she stood in front of me and left with blood in her arms. In the ruins, she used up her last bit of strength to take care of me and face death alone. 8 reincarnations, 8 separations, the vortex of love and death entangles us tightly. I am reborn again and again with my memories, just to change her fate, even if it means exchanging my life for her chance to live. But why is it that the ending is always the same? It wasn't until the 9th time that I discovered the truth. Then, reborn for the 9th time, I'll be the player. Chapter 1. Claire really knows how to play games. Whenever she's low on money, she takes on a mission to please Michael. Once she succeeds, she pretends to be dead and sneaks away. I stared at the screen in confusion. What if Claire was healing me like a boss trying to rack up points? I suppressed my anger, held my breath, and continued to read the comments on the screen. The next sentence that pierced my heart suddenly appeared. What a pitiful NPC. He didn't even know that Claire was about to marry someone else in another world, but he has been living in deep self-blame, thinking that he killed her. My throat tightened, and my fingers subconsciously grasped the edge of the chair. The comments continued. Claire completed the task very smoothly this time, but the reward is only 1/10, right? I guess she will spend all the points soon and start a new task. How many times will she have to use this routine? My chest seemed to be pressed down by a huge force. I couldn't breathe. The surroundings turned into nothingness, and it was so quiet that I couldn't even hear the sound of my heartbeat. I don't know how long it took, but I opened my eyes again. The scene in front of me made me feel dazed. I was sitting in a cafe. The air was filled with a faint aroma of coffee, and the sun shone through the glass window onto the wooden table. A young girl stood in front of me. The golden sunlight reflected on her smooth chestnut hair. She looked down at me, seeming a little nervous. "Hi." She pursed her lips, her voice a little timid. "Handsome guy, can I add your contact information?" The word handsome guy made me stunned for a few seconds. She seemed a little embarrassed and shy. I don't mean anything else. I just want to make friends." Her eyes shyly turned away from my face, but my mind was in a mess. That familiar voice, that familiar shyness. "Claire?" I was shocked and finally realized what happened. I was reborn. I was reborn to the day when I first met Claire. At this moment, a piece of translucent text suddenly appeared in my field of vision, as if floating in the void. A scrolling bullet screen began to flash. Are you serious? Is this the same plot again? This routine is too old-fashioned. Michael absolutely fell in love with this genre. This opening line may be outdated, but it is always perfect for him. That's 8 times. Can't Claire try a new strategy? Stop complaining. Claire doesn't care. The faster her tasks are completed, the more money she makes. I froze, my fists slowly clenched. The repeated mention of mission and strategy in the barrage pricked my nerves like needles. My mind was pulled by the scrolling words and past memories, and fell into endless confusion and pain. Chapter 2. This is my 8th reincarnation. Every time I wake up, I carry with me the memories of my past life and the mission that I cannot escape. To save her, to protect her, and to be with her until the end of my life. Claire, my first love, the only person I've ever loved deeply, died in front of me 8 times to save me, and each of her deaths was like a dull knife, slowly and cruelly cutting into my soul. I thought that my efforts would one day break the shackles of fate, but every rebirth was in vain. The first time we were at the beach, I thought it was going to be a pleasant vacation, but it turned out to be the beginning of a nightmare. I was accidentally swept into the sea by the waves, struggling and shouting. She jumped down and pushed me to the shore, but the next second, a huge wave ruthlessly swallowed her figure. I was coughing dryly on the beach, and when I turned around, I only saw her back being swept away by the waves. I rushed over and called her name, but she didn't float up again. The second time, she stood in front of me and used her frail body to block the blade that was stabbing at me. Blood gushed out of her chest, staining my palm red. She leaned in my arms, breathing weakly, her lips opening and closing, as if she was saying something, but I couldn't hear anything. Finally, her body collapsed weakly in my arms, and I could only hold her, like a complete failure. The third time, we were trapped in the ruins. She used up all the water and food to keep me alive, while she slowly withered in despair. When I finally regained consciousness, her hand was still tightly clasped in mine, already cold. I held her hand, crying silently, and the whole world seemed to collapse. The fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time, no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, fate always took her away from me in different ways. Every time she died, it was so that I could live. But what is the meaning of living? Is it to watch her die in front of me again and again? I tried to question the world, tried to fight against this absurd cycle. But no matter how angry or desperate I was, I couldn't change the outcome. I began to hate this unfair fate. Why could I only watch her die? Why could I only move forward with the memory of her death? Just when I was almost swallowed by despair, those scrolling comments told me a truth I couldn't believe. What a pitiful NPC. Claire completed her mission really well, but the reward is only 1/10 of it, so she may have to start a new game soon. He really thought this was true love, but he didn't know he was just a tool to score points. I thought love was unshakable. Claire and I experienced life and death struggles and countless separations. All of this was just part of a strategy game. Claire was a player following the plot, and I was just an NPC who was being brushed for points. Chapter 3. This is ridiculous. I stared at the floating text on the screen. I couldn't accept this truth. My brain was working frantically, trying to find evidence to prove the absurdity of this information. Unfortunately, the more I try to deny it, the more they remind me that this might be true. After all, I have loved Claire 8 times. For her, I have given everything I have, time, life, and even soul. And what about her? She smiled at me. She gave up herself at the most critical moment and left me the hope of life. Those memories are as clear as if they happened just yesterday. Every tear and hug of hers are real. They can't be fake, right? I close my eyes and try to get rid of the barrage of words from my mind. This must be wrong. This must be a mistake. Claire wouldn't do this. She wouldn't do this to me. But no matter how hard I tried, those words were like an invisible hand, strangling my throat. Why didn't Michael respond this time? Claire started to get impatient. It seems the strategy needs to be updated. Even a dumb NPC like Michael can have bugs. My eyes flew open, and my heartbeat started to go out of control. Stupid NPC? Bug! I couldn't help but grit my teeth. Let's guess. Since Michael won't give her his contact information, what will Claire do? Claire would surely be pathetic in this situation. Then new comments emerged. She might say, "I'm sorry, I'm not the kind of girl who asks for someone's contact information. This is the first time I've mustered up the courage to ask. This is not just anger, but a complete sense of betrayal." Those familiar words, I never asked for other people's contact information. I just want to make friends. These were clearly the moments when she shyly confessed her love. How could they become the laughingstock of these people? To make matters worse, the discussion continues. It looks like everyone knows that the first NPC, Claire, is trying to formulate a strategy. That guy, referring to Michael, is not easy to conquer, so Claire had to use all her skills. She even used the trick of pitiful and weak. She really tried her best. But don't forget, this is the 8th time. Claire is tired of using the same old trick, right? Will it still work? The 8th time. That word pierced my mind like a nail. Yes, this is the 8th time. In every life, her routines were so natural and so real. But I was fooled again and again, indulged in them again and again, and felt heartbroken for her death again and again. But is all this really just a strategy? If this is true, then who am I? If I'm an NPC, then what's the point of all this? Chapter 4. I felt a chill run down my spine and cold sweat trickled down my back. A terrifying voice echoed in my head. How could they know this? The comments in those barges were so precise, not even missing out on any detail. It was like some kind of invisible God's perspective was watching my life, laying out everything about me for everyone to comment on. Michael. Her voice gently called my attention back. Claire's eyes were slightly red, and she looked at me with a sense of uneasiness and anxiety, as if she was afraid of losing something. She slowly approached me, stretched out her hand, and tried to grab my sleeve. Michael, can you? Don't touch me. I interrupted her coldly and shook off her hand. Claire froze in her tracks, obviously not expecting me to react like this. After a few seconds of silence, she forced a wry smile, her tone aggrieved like a little animal being wronged. I'm sorry, you may have misunderstood. I really didn't mean anything else. I didn't say anything, I just stared at her. At that moment, my gaze was like a cold mirror, trying to pierce through her shell and find the truth hidden underneath. I just want to make friends. She lowered her head, her voice trembling a little. I've always been shy and never dared to take the initiative to talk to boys. You are the first person who made me feel special, and the first person I had the courage to get close to. If, if I disturbed you, I am really sorry." Her tone was weak and cautious, as if she was trying to save something. After saying this, she lowered her head and turned to leave. Before leaving, she looked back at me, with a crystal tear hanging from the corner of her eye, flickering slightly in the sun. Every word she said was like a line from a script that had been repeated countless times. I could no longer deceive myself that those true feelings were probably just performances in her mission. Her back slowly disappeared from my sight, but her pitiful appearance was still replaying in my mind. But now, I can no longer feel the throbbing heartbeat I had at that time. Instead, I feel indifference, vigilance, and those scrolling bullet comments constantly appearing in my mind. See, she's starting to use her old tricks. Claire is the best at this, pretending to be pitiful, and men fall for it the most. Don't be fooled. This is only the first step in the mission. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. The cold words in the comments perfectly matched every line she had just said, as if she was following the script. Her every look, every movement, and even every word were written in advance by the barrage. This accurate prediction made me feel creepy. Was that tear just now, that turning back, really just a carefully designed performance? Could it be that she never had any true feelings for me from the beginning? At this moment, I caught a glimpse of a new comment on the screen. Michael seems to be more vigilant this time. It seems that Claire will have to work harder. There was another one that made me even more nervous. Wait, is this the 8th time? Claire is really too experienced, but this time it seems a little bit difficult. I clenched my fists tighter, and my body trembled slightly. I didn't want to be a victim in this game anymore. I had to figure everything out, no matter what the cost. Chapter 5. Back in the dorm, I lay down exhausted and began to recall the 8 times I had met Claire. The past flashed before my eyes and replayed in my mind over and over again. Then I realized that everything had already begun. Those memories are like a broken projector, flashing before my eyes frame by frame. The heartbeat when we first met, her smile when I confessed my love, her slightly trembling hands when we kissed, the tears in her eyes when I proposed to her. Then came the final accident and the final separation. Her figure was forever frozen in the moment when she sacrificed herself for me. I never noticed that although our relationship was becoming more and more in tune, time was compressed in each rebirth. From the first 3 years to the last 6 months, everything was accelerating, as if someone was in a hurry to complete a task, but I was unaware of it. I naively thought that this was because the love between us had penetrated deep into our bones. So even if each rebirth would cost me a huge price, or even exhaust my lifespan, I would not hesitate. As long as she still has a glimmer of hope to live, as long as I can see her again and feel her warmth again, I am willing to give everything. However, the 6th time, when Claire died again to save me, fate revealed the truth to me for the first time. At the moment she closed her eyes, I suddenly saw a series of bullet comments, like a sudden lightning, shattering my world. What a fool. Claire completed the mission smoothly this time, but the reward doesn't seem to be much. Haha, he doesn't even know that he is just an NPC, just a puppet controlled by others. I remember that moment. My hands were shaking, my breathing was rapid, and the life and death we experienced was nothing but an elaborate scam. I remember that night. My laughter echoed in the empty room. My throat was torn by the laughter and hurt. I coughed so hard that I almost vomited the acid in my stomach, but I couldn't stop, because besides laughing, I didn't know what else I could do. At this moment, new comments popped up again. What's going on? Why is Michael laughing like a madman? This plot doesn't seem right. Hasn't he always been foolishly in love with Claire? Did it break down today? Actually, it's not wrong. Michael S. setting is to be a stupid NPC. He is born unable to refuse Claire. There is a deeper sting in the following comments. Claire is really great. Every time she uses a strategy on Michael, she can suck away his luck. Look at him now. His health is getting worse and worse. His school has gone from a top university to an ordinary second-rate college. His family has fallen apart, and his life expectancy has even been reduced by 30 years. Claire failed this time. I guess she is stamping her feet in anger now. What do you think Michael S.'s reaction would be if he saw Claire with his own eyes? Chapter 6. For some reason, when I read that comment, Claire suddenly appeared in my mind, as if driven by some invisible force. I seemed to see her situation at the moment. She was sitting in an empty room, with a sneer on her face, muttering to herself. How disgusting. Does he really think I don't know what he's doing? Her voice was filled with disgust and contempt. Like a little lapdog, he acts like he's never seen a woman in his life. I just wag my fingers and he comes over to lick my toes. What is he pretending to be? Her tone was as if she was mocking a lowly creature, and that creature was me. Who does he really think he is? She rolled her eyes and continued with a sneer. If it weren't for the mission requirements, I would feel disgusted even looking at him. People like him are not even worthy of carrying my shoes. He is just a tool. System, listen carefully. After this mission is over, I want triple the reward. I know this idiot doesn't have much luck left, and his lifespan is almost drained, but there are many trash NPCs like him. What's the big deal if he dies again? It's his honor to be my capture target. Understood. The system's cold and mechanical voice sounded. At that moment, I sat up suddenly from the bed, my clothes soaked with cold sweat on my back. My body was shaking uncontrollably, my fingers were clutching the sheets, and it felt like a huge rock was pressing on my chest, making it hard for me to breathe. Is this Claire as true face? The woman I've loved for 8 lifetimes. All her gentleness, every sacrifice she made, turned out to be just a carefully designed illusion? Is this how she sees me? Cheap, humble, and not worth mentioning? Even death is just a trivial matter to her? I gritted my teeth, feeling like I was being suffocated by an indescribable feeling of disgust and anger. Her voice was still echoing in my mind, and that kind of malicious contempt pierced the most vulnerable part of my heart. Claire's image continued to play in my mind. She was still cursing me, like she was venting her dissatisfaction with a worthless toy. My nails dug deep into my palms. The pain kept me awake for a while, but my anger was like a flood that broke through the dam, and I couldn't suppress it. Claire in the picture suddenly shouted, her tone full of panic. Why did Michael's favorability towards me drop by 10 points? Her face turned pale instantly, and her eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Her condescending indifference was immediately replaced by horror. She looked around like crazy, as if trying to find the answer. Her image suddenly disappeared, replaced by a rapidly refreshing barrage of comments. Oh wow, what happened? Michael's favorability dropped by 10 points. If I remember correctly, his affection points for Claire were still 60%, right? Now it has dropped directly to 50%. Ha! This is so funny. Claire was so confident in this strategy that she even set a time limit for a month in advance. She also laughed at Michael for being stupid, saying that she could conquer him within a week. As a result, it dropped by 10 points on the first day. He deserved it. The barrage was full of ridicule, like a carnival party, and the theme of the party was Claire's failure. Ha, I told you before, this trick works against other NPCs, but it's the 8th time against Michael, and it no longer works. But wait, I heard that the rules of time and space seem to have changed recently. If the mission fails, the player must exchange lives with the NPC. In other words, the player will become an NPC, and the NPC will enter the real world and inherit everything from the player. My heart sank. Exchange lives? The word exploded in my mind. This is so interesting. Claire used the mission reward to buy a villa and a luxury car, while Michael is just a poor student. If the two of them switched identities, would Claire still be able to adapt to this poor life? Just think about her squeezing into the subway, eating instant noodles, and living in the basement every day. It's really funny. The comments continued to refresh rapidly, but my mind felt like it was hit by a heavy hammer. Exchange lives? Inherit everything from the player? This rule change was so absurd, but it seemed like some kind of providence, and I felt a strange sense of relief. The barrage on the screen suddenly went blank, as if it had been cleared by some force. Chapter 8. Their discussion didn't attract much attention, as if it was just the background noise of daily chatting, but a storm was set off in my heart. I repeated those words silently, chewing the phrase exchange of life over and over in my mind. Every time I read out this concept, I felt a chill rising in my heart, mixed with a faint excitement. My thoughts were like a tangled mess, twisted into a vague chaos. Exchange lives? What would happen if I could really inherit everything from her? My eyes fell on the ceiling, but there was no answer there. Only the cold, white wall reflected the loneliness of the room. My chest felt like a huge rock was pressing down on me, making it hard for me to breathe. Suddenly, some fragments of memories that I had long buried came up and hit my mind. I have never been truly happy in this world. My mother was just one of my father's countless mistresses. She didn't have much affection for me, perhaps because my birth was not expected. I was sent to the countryside to live with my grandparents since I was a child. In that silent and depressing family, I learned how to survive in the cracks and how to bow my head. There was no warmth for me there, no real sense of belonging. Even if I worked hard to do housework and got good grades, I was always compared and lost in return. Why can't you be as good as your brother? It's enough for him to just come and see us once in a while. And what about me? I have never been praised or affirmed, but have been asked to give more and bear more. That kind of life lasted for 18 years. The silent neglect and indifference made me feel suffocated. I had no choice but to live cautiously, trying to find a sense of existence in being ignored. But the feeling of desperately chasing was like walking on the beach. The sand under your feet became looser and looser, and you could never find a real foothold. Until I met Claire. She was like a ray of light that came into my life without warning. She listened to me and understood my deepest pain. I had never told anyone about the experiences that suffocated me, but her presence was like a key that opened my closed heart. I thought she was the only salvation in my miserable life. Her gentle smile, her bright eyes, her comfort and companionship. Everything was so natural and beautiful. I regarded her as my whole world and a harbor I could rely on. Every word of her encouragement was like a ray of sunshine in winter, which made me gradually forget those dark years. But now, that beautiful light was ruthlessly torn apart by the truth. Claire is not salvation. She is a nightmare. She is a cold-blooded woman who uses my vulnerability and dependence as a tool to play with, and treats me like a puppy who can be manipulated and abandoned at any time. Why should I pity her? Her gentleness is fake, her sacrifice is fake, and her love for me is even more fake. She is just a ruthless player, and I am just an NPC used in her mission. Then why can't I take her life? I closed my eyes, and what came to my mind was her current life. A luxury house, a luxury car, financial freedom. The freedom she bought with my luck, the wealth she bought with my pain, are now within her reach. What about me? I am a poor student living in a cramped rental house, worrying about the little tuition and living expenses every day, and even breathing feels heavy. Isn't this exchange worthwhile? In just 1 month, if she fails her mission, her world will be turned upside down. In just 1 month, she will experience everything I have endured all these years, and I will inherit everything from her. The villa, the luxury car, the free life. All the things I thought I would never have are now within reach. At this moment, I suddenly felt that those comments were not mocking me, but more like a gift. They were the key that fate threw at me, a key that could free me from pain and change my life. Chapter 8. In the following days, Claire frequently appeared in my sight. Sometimes she was like a stranger passing by chance, and sometimes she acted as a deliberate chance encounter, trying to approach me with a fake harmless smile. However, I always remained indifferent to her, as if I was watching a drama that had nothing to do with me. No matter how she behaved, I remained indifferent. I didn't even bother to look at her. I could feel her anxiety. The panic of not being able to control the situation was almost written on her face. And my indifference seemed to be a barrier that she couldn't cross. At the same time, the comments were still flashing in my sight, like a window into her heart. Those words not only mocked Claire, but also made me gradually understand her true state. In a video in a certain bullet screen window, Claire was sitting in the room, looking gloomy and frowning. She was looking in a certain direction in the void, her tone full of distress and impatience. "System," she complained, her voice full of annoyance. "What's going on? Wasn't Michael's program fixed? Why is this walkthrough so difficult? Is his favorability locked? Or is there a bug?" The system's voice sounded mechanical and bland. "Host, according to my data, the target has not shown any abnormalities. All numerical values and emotional feedback are within the normal range. Perhaps your performance was too perfunctory and did not allow the target to feel enough emotional resonance. It is recommended to adjust the strategy." Claire's brows furrowed even more tightly, and her lips were pursed into a straight line. She seemed to be irritated, but she had to suppress her anger. "Perfunctory?" She sneered, her tone full of reluctance. "Are you saying it's my problem? I've done everything I should do. How could it be that I'm perfunctory?" The system continued without any emotion. "Host, the time limit for this mission is 1 month, and you have already wasted 8 days. It is recommended that you adjust the plan immediately. Otherwise, the probability of mission failure will increase significantly." Claire slammed her fist on the table, and there was a chuckle from the barrage, as if they were laughing at her joke. She was silent for a while, lowered her head, and bit her lips, her eyes showing reluctance and a hint of panic. Then, she seemed to have made up her mind, raised her head, and said, "Okay, in that case, I will start Plan B tomorrow. I don't believe that I can't deal with such a poor guy." The comments immediately exploded. Haha, she finally couldn't help it and started Plan B. Claire's patience seems to be reaching its limit. Plan B? I bet it's still her old tricks. No matter what she does, I just want to see her make a fool of herself. As I read these comments, I sneered. What could her Plan B be? Should you continue to test me with a more gentle attitude, or use more violent means to break my indifference? No matter what, everything about her cannot escape the gaze of this barrage of comments, and I am no longer the fool who can be easily impressed. So, Claire, what's next for you? Show me how good your new strategy is. Chapter 8. Claire finally started to implement her Plan B. The next day, when I arrived at the coffee shop for work, I noticed a strange tension in the air. Not long after, the new manager walked straight up to me, without even a small talk, and said coldly, "Michael, we have received a complaint about your service attitude. Starting today, you are fired." His words were as clear as a stone falling to the ground, and the air around us froze instantly. I stared at his expressionless face, and a sneer flashed through my heart. Sure enough, Claire chose to start with my work as expected. As soon as he finished speaking, the barrage of comments exploded instantly. Haha, it's the same old routine. Claire is just a player who repeats her skills. Her Plan B is too boring. Newbies, look here, Claire's tactics have 3 tricks. The green tea version, pretending to fall to gain sympathy. The sweet girl version, pretending to be a soulmate. And the mainstream rescue hero version. The goal is to make Michael inseparable from her. Michael is so polite. How can there be a problem with his service attitude? This excuse is really low level. I took a deep breath, feeling helpless and absurd. These moves were indeed familiar enough to make me sick. In every reincarnation before, she used these means to drag me step by step into her trap, but I never realized it. I was so addicted to the illusions she carefully wove that I couldn't tell the difference between the real and the fake. But now I am different. I looked up at the manager, my tone calm, but full of chill. "Manager." I pointed to a corner of the store. "This coffee shop has 360-degree surveillance, which records the working status of every employee. Can you tell me which customer complained to me and when? Or can you just show me the complaint record?" The manager was visibly stunned, and his eyes dodged. He hesitated for a moment, but still tried to suppress me with a tough tone. "This is none of your business. You just need to know that you are fired." As soon as he finished speaking, a soft but familiar voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Manager, the way you treat your employees makes me uncomfortable." I turned around, and it was indeed Claire. She stood there, hands on her hips, with a hint of anger in her eyes, like a savior who was fighting for me. Chapter 10. I can almost recite the following scenes. Claire began to criticize the manager fiercely. Her voice was not loud, but every word was sharp. "How can you expect this store to have good performance if you treat employees like this?" The manager sneered at first, obviously not wanting to pay attention to her. But Claire did not intend to give up easily. She took out her cell phone from her bag and dialed a number. Her voice softened instantly. "Uncle, I had some problems at a coffee shop. The manager here was very rude to the employees." "Oh, yes, that chain store." After she hung up the phone, the atmosphere in the entire coffee shop changed. The manager's face froze, but the comments were full of joy. "Ha, Claire's classic hero-saving scene is here. Her uncle is the chairman of the parent company. This is so cliched. This scene makes me laugh. Michael is so pitiful. He falls into the same trap every time." In the next 10 minutes, the manager's attitude changed 180 degrees. He apologized to Claire with a big smile on his face. Not only did he not fire me, he even offered me a promotion. In the end, the scene ended with Claire's victory. She became the hero, and I was the one she successfully protected. She turned to look at me with a genuine smile on her face, as if she had just done something great. "Michael, this will never happen again. You are such a handsome guy. How could anyone treat you like this?" I couldn't help but smile a little at her words, but it was more of sarcasm than gratitude. The comments quickly started rolling. "Michael, don't be fooled by her again. She's like a poisonous apple, which looks good, but is deadly if you eat it. Her smile is so fake. I can even smell the hypocrisy." Claire obviously didn't notice what I was thinking. She smiled gently and said in an almost confident tone, "You look very handsome when you smile." Her words seemed tentative, But my reaction was not what she expected. I nodded and said calmly, "Thank you. You look better when you smile." Claire was stunned for a moment. Then her smile became even brighter. She thought her plan was successful, and that I had been moved by her rescue. In fact, I was just waiting for a better opportunity. If it weren't for your help, today would be really troublesome. I continued, "I'll treat you to a meal some other day to express my gratitude." As I was talking, I took out my phone and added her on WeChat. Her smile became more confident, as if she felt that she had succeeded in winning me over again. But at this moment, I took a look at the comments. Oh my God, is Michael really fooled by this performance? His favorability didn't increase, but dropped by 7 points. It was 50% yesterday, and now it has dropped to 43%. What happened? I couldn't help but let out a cold smile. This time, her efforts were not only useless, but were gradually failing. She might never know that I had seen through everything about her. Chapter 11. Claire obviously couldn't understand what was going on. After we separated, she immediately summoned the system, desperate to figure out why my favorability suddenly dropped. The anxiety almost made her unable to think, and her voice was sharp and trembling. "System," she yelled, almost roaring. "Are you kidding me?" The way Michael looked at me just now was like he was proposing to me. He has obviously been completely conquered by me, so why is his favorability still decreasing? Tell me, his favorability towards me is only 43% now. This is absolutely impossible. The system was silent for a few seconds, and then responded in its usual calm voice. "Host, the data has been reviewed. Michael's favorability is indeed 43%. Please note that this is not a system error, and all records are normal." Claire's face turned pale in an instant. Her lips trembled slightly, and there was an undisguised fear in her eyes. She lowered her head and murmured to herself, "No, Michael can't be so cold to me. His eyes clearly—" She bit her lip, as if fighting against her inner doubts. She even asked the system to recheck the data more than once, and the system's answer was always the same. The data is accurate and correct. "This must be a bug," she screamed hysterically, but her inner doubts and fears grew. The system responded with a hint of doubt. Could this really be a bug? But based on the simple logic of the target, such data should not be wrong. And I was watching all this coldly. Every struggle, every roar, every despair of hers made me feel an inexplicable pleasure in my heart. Chapter 12. Not long after, Claire suddenly pointed at a WeChat message of mine, as if grasping a life-saving straw, and sneered. "This is not a bug. Look at this. Michael just sent me a message." The message content on the screen was projected by the system and was clearly visible. "Claire, thank you so much for today. I used to think that beautiful girls were always proud and looked down on others. But you made me change my mind. You are so kind that I feel a little ashamed of myself." The message even contained a few warm, flirtatious words at the end, sounding sincere and slightly shy. The barrage of comments also began to discuss the message. "Well, this message does seem quite sincere, but why do I feel like something is wrong?" It's too timely, like a deliberate comfort to completely dispel Claire's doubts. Is Michael really sincere? What is he thinking? Claire immediately became full of confidence, and even smiled for the first time in a long time. She laughed softly a few times, and then said to the system confidently, "See, this is the normal situation. System, don't scare me anymore. Everything is under my control. Wait, I will get the reward for this mission soon." However, the comments seemed to know the truth of the matter better than. "Claire, this message is really a bit weird. Michael's previous indifference is unlikely to change suddenly. This looks more like a strategy. Has Michael unlocked the God's perspective? Or he's playing a trick on Claire?" I watched all this and couldn't help but sneer in my heart. Perhaps it wasn't me who was in the God's perspective, but the bystanders in the barrage. They seemed to see it more clearly than anyone else, including Claire and her system. Chapter 13. In the following days, I began to take the initiative to invite Claire out on dates. Every time we arranged something romantic. At dawn, we stood on the beach and watched the sunrise. At night, I accompanied her to the top of the mountain and looked up at the starry sky. I used my tenderness and affection to make her completely let down her guard, just like the previous 6 reincarnations. During a date to watch a horror movie, when the female ghost in red appeared on the screen for the 8th time, she threw herself into my arms in panic. I didn't push her away, but hugged her tightly and patted her back gently, like a gentle lover. She slowly raised her head and looked at me with a hint of shyness in her eyes. I turned around and tried to kiss her, but she shyly lowered her head, her cheeks slightly flushed. The comments immediately exploded. This is Claire's best tactic, playing hard to get. This kind of restrained intimacy is most likely to impress men. This is a textbook operation by a professional strategy expert. It seems that Michael is about to fall into her trap again. Claire's confidence also rose, and she looked at me with a triumphant look in her eyes. She seemed certain that her strategy was about to work and that everything was under her control. However, what she didn't know was that after each date, the system's update of my favorability would make her fall into despair. She began to repeatedly question the system, even roaring. Why? Why did he kiss me and hug me? Why doesn't he like me? Where is the bud? The system remains indifferent. All data is normal, host. The comments on the barrage seemed increasingly excited. It's so weird, Michael's performance is completely in line with the strategy. Why is his favorability decreasing every day? It was 60% on the first day, and now it has dropped to 19%. Claire is going to collapse. Is Michael sober? Is he trying to seduce Claire? When the comment "Rue Claire" appeared, the barrage suddenly fell silent, and then a louder discussion broke out. If that's the case, the plot is really interesting. However, if the mission fails, what punishment will the system impose? What will happen to Claire? I don't know, but I think Claire is really finished this time. I looked at the comments and sneered. This game was no longer her one-man show. What she thought was a victory was just a silent counterattack arranged by me. Chapter 14. Claire couldn't wait any longer. On the 21st day, she decided to abandon all the subtle tricks and take the most extreme action to complete the task. She had no time to waste. In the past 20 days, she had consumed too much energy in the ineffective tug-of-war with me. And in the remaining 10 days, she had to complete all the remaining steps to increase my favorability to 100%. The scene that day was a farce. In front of many witnesses, she was wearing a white wedding dress, holding a bouquet of roses in her arms, and tremblingly confessed to me. She stood at the door of the coffee shop, looking nervous and uneasy, but her voice was trying to remain firm. Michael, will you marry me? Her performance was perfect. Whether it was her seemingly genuine panic, the slight blush on her cheeks, or even the rose in her hand, it exuded a carefully designed romantic atmosphere. People around her began to applaud and cheer, and the atmosphere was warm and touching. I stood there, seemingly deeply moved by her confession, but in fact, I was completely calm. My right hand had just chopped onions, and the fingers were still stained with a pungent smell. I deliberately raised my hand and pinched my forehead, letting the stimulation of the onion make my eyes slightly red, pretending to be so moved that I was about to cry. Okay, I whispered, pretending that I couldn't bear to reject her affection. Claire stood on tiptoe, closed her eyes, and waited for my kiss. However, I just stood there, indifferent like a puppet. My indifference gradually turned the expectation on her face into stiffness. At this moment, the barrage began to swipe the screen frantically, showing a big number, 9%. 9%. This number jumped into my sight like a mockery, and I knew what it meant. My favorability had dropped again. It was like a game interface, and I only needed to enter a command to see the change in favorability. Comments emerged in the barrage. 9%? Michael looked so touched, but his favorability dropped by 10 points. Haha. Fun fact. Michael's affection points for stray dogs are 25%, while Claire's is only 9%. This shows that in Michael's eyes, Claire is not even as good as a dog. Michael really woke up? This is all so exciting. I can't wait to see Claire's complete collapse. I lowered my eyes to hide the sneer on my lips. The wedding dress, the roses, the live confession, these carefully planned actions seemed ridiculous to me. Claire must have thought she had already won, but what she didn't know was that every time she tried, I would be one step further away from her. Chapter 15. However, Claire's breakdown was yet to come. Before she lost control, her system failed first. The cold electronic voice suddenly burst out with anger. No, Claire. How did you get into this situation? Haven't you used up all your resources? Why is Michael's affection points not only not increasing, but also decreasing every day? The system's voice was filled with unprecedented anger and confusion. I warned you before not to be too eager for quick success, but you were like a blood-sucking bag, desperately draining Michael's emotional points. Now look, the plot has completely collapsed. Michael doesn't like you at all. Claire looked like she was going crazy. Her face was pale, and she held her head in her hands, as if she had been hit hard by reality. In the video, she was frantically flipping through our chat history, trying to find any possible clues to explain all this. Impossible. Her voice was trembling and desperate. Everything is the same as before, even better. Michael is gentler and more considerate to me than before. Why did his favorability drop? Why? Tears welled up in her eyes and her voice choked up. System, this must be your fault. You created a bug. You ruined my mission. However, the system showed no emotion and said coldly, "This has nothing to do with the system. All data is normal. I have told you many times that the problem lies with you." Claire slammed the table angrily, as if she wanted to pull the system out of thin air. "It's your system that has a problem. There are only 10 days left before the end of the mission. What if it fails? Do you want me to bear the consequences?" The comments began to flood the screen frantically. The doggy-dog drama is finally staged. Claire is finally anxious. Why didn't she think about today when she was sucking Michael's luck? This is all too exciting. Now I just want to see Claire completely collapse. After a series of insults, Clara's expression suddenly calmed down. She asked cautiously, "Brother system, do you have any props that can quickly increase favorability? For example, something that can forcibly change the status quo?" Chapter 16. The system was silent for a while, as if searching the database. After a while, it replied, "There is such a prop, but it requires exchanging resources. The problem is that Michael's favorability towards you is too low now, and you can't exchange items simply by relying on his affection value. You need to make up for it with other things: money, lifespan, physical function, family status." Claire immediately sneered and said coldly, "Of course not. Why should I pay the price? This mission was originally aimed at him. Then what do you plan to use?" The system seemed to be irritated by her words, and its tone became even colder. Claire rolled her eyes and said with disdain, "Of course I'll use Michael's stuff. He's just a tool. Do I need to waste my resources?" The system paused for a moment and then said, "Michael doesn't have much money, and he only has 5 years left to live. This does not meet the exchange conditions." Claire waved her hand and said disdainfully, "Isn't it enough to use his family situation and body functions? System, do you still need me to teach you this little thing?" The system hesitated for a moment but still responded, "Exchange item, blind date pill. The effect is as follows. The target Michael's family situation undergoes a major change. From parents' divorce to parents' death, grandparents' cruelty value increases by 50%. Living environment is reduced from kitchen to pigsty, and diet is reduced from simple meals to starvation. The prop will take effect immediately after taking it." Claire's eyes flashed with a gleam of victory, and she smiled coldly. "Very good. Now we can start." Chapter 17. This change will take effect after the strategy is completed and the data is refreshed. The barrage of comments on the screen exploded immediately, and people's anger poured out like a flood. Is Claire still human? She has squeezed Michael dry, and now she's trying to trade for the rest of his life. This is undoubtedly the most vicious attacker I've ever seen. She has made a fortune in this world, and she can't take the money away at all, but she's still reluctant to use her own resources. This is a completely inhumane act. I really want to slap her right now. The blind date pill must be taken to be effective. Michael, if you can really see the barrage of comments, don't take it, or induce vomiting immediately. I watched these words pour out silently, and their anger actually made me feel a little warm. Even these invisible bystanders were more sincere than Claire. And what about Claire? She stood in her own world with a vicious expression on her face, but she still thought she was superior. She didn't feel pain. She never felt pain because her knife always stabbed others, not herself. Claire, I sneered in my heart. If this is how you want to live your life, then... She couldn't even wait until the next day. She came straight to my house that night, her face full of deliberate anxiety and kindness. She pretended to need help, but the conversation was just a cover, and soon she revealed her purpose. "Michael," she said softly, her tone full of concern, "I noticed that you looked a little tired recently. Did you have trouble sleeping at night? I was really worried about you. So I went to the hospital to get you some medicine. If you take these medicines, you will definitely sleep better." I looked up and calmly looked into her eyes, my gaze piercing straight through her disguised shell. Her voice sounded concerned, but the tension in her eyes betrayed her. I smiled. My smile was calm, but I didn't say anything. Claire's smile froze for a moment, but soon returned to a soft expression. Brother, why are you looking at me like that? Don't you believe me? I really care about you. Otherwise, why would I spend so much time looking for medicine for you? If you keep looking at me like that, it's really going to hurt my feelings, you know that? There was already a hint of impatience in her tone when she said these words, and she knew she couldn't waste any more time. Just as she was about to resume her familiar manipulation tactics, I spoke up. Of course not, babe. My voice was soft, even grateful. I just think it's very thoughtful of you. It really touches me. Hearing this, Claire breathed a sigh of relief. Her expression softened, and she handed me a light golden pill. That's good, Michael. Take it quickly. It will really be good for you. I took the pill without hesitation, pretended to look at it carefully, and then swallowed it directly. Claire stared at me nervously, with anticipation and a hint of cunning in her eyes. When she saw me swallow the pill, she finally relaxed and smiled brightly. Michael, I'm really glad that you believe in me. I nodded and didn't say much. After she turned around and left happily, I quickly spat the pill out from under my tongue and threw it into the trash can. The comments instantly exploded. Oh my God! Michael spit out the pill. Did he really unlock the God's perspective? Too exciting. Michael is fully awake. Claire is so happy, but she doesn't know that Michael's favorability has dropped to 5%. When Claire checks the favorability, she will definitely go crazy. Ha ha! I laughed. Watching Claire's plan being silently resolved, I felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. All of this was just as she had designed it. She was just digging her own grave, and I was just quietly watching her dig deeper. Chapter 18. However, Claire's happiness did not last long. Less than a day later, her system sent new favorability data, 5%. She completely collapsed. She stood in the middle of the room, gritting her teeth, and roared at the interface in the void. System, what on earth did you give me? Michael has clearly taken the medicine. Why did his favorability drop to 5%? The system seemed confused by the sudden data, and a hint of impatience appeared in the mechanical voice. Is this a positive item or a negative item? Claire, how should I know? Can you please try to reflect on yourself? Your vicious nature not only makes Michael hate you, but even I don't want to serve you anymore. Reflection? Claire's voice was piercingly sharp. She stared at the screen, as if trying to find some explanation from it. Are you blaming me now? This is a problem with your system, and you dare to blame me? The comments exploded again. The system can't stand it anymore. Don't bite though. Claire's trick has completely failed. This mission is definitely over. She deserves it. All this is just her own fault. The system interrupted her roar coldly. Claire, there are only 8 days left for the mission. Do you have any other ideas? Claire was obviously panicking. Tears began to well up in her eyes, and her tone became weaker. System brother, do you have any other props? There are only 8 days left. We can't fail. Michael's lifespan is used as a reward. If I fail, I will lose everything. We can use his body functions to exchange for a stronger prop, right? The system was silent for a long time, as if hesitating, but finally compromised. Exchange item. Love is as deep as the sea. The screen displayed a detailed description. The target's body functions have changed, including but not limited to heart failure, anemia, diabetes, migraine, lumbar disc herniation, varicose veins, gallstones, kidney stones, lung nodules, and hemorrhoids. This change will take effect after the strategy is completed and the data is refreshed. Claire's hand. She had a crazy smile on her face, as if she had forgotten all the out-of-control situations. Very good this time. I will definitely complete the task. This move completely ignited the anger of the barrage. Can Claire have a little humanity? She has already sucked Michael's luck and lifespan dry, and now she wants to torture his body. This woman is simply a demon. Michael has awakened, and all her strategies are doomed to fail. When the mission is over, she will have to pay for what she did to Michael. This is what is called, you reap what you sow. Someone raised the question, what exactly is this love as deep as the sea? Does anyone know its effect? Soon another comment answered this question. I know. This is a special item. It is colorless and tasteless. Once taken, the target's favorability will instantly increase to 100%. But it only affects the target's surface emotions and cannot change the deeper attitude. But Michael's favorability is only 5% now. And don't forget, if his favorability drops to 0, the mission will automatically fail. There is another key point. Under normal circumstances, the minimum favorability value is 5%, and it will not be lower. But if the player's identity is exposed, the system will directly determine that the strategy has failed. Seeing this information, I suddenly stopped, and a clear idea flashed through my mind like lightning. As long as I can find a way to expose Claris' identity as a strategist, her mission will automatically fail, and I don't even need to bother dealing with her clumsy tricks. A strange excitement surged into my heart. The anger and depression suppressed in my chest seemed to be dispelled by a relaxing force. I raised my head, looking at the comments as if through the void, revealing a sincere smile. The barrage of comments immediately exploded. Wait a minute, did you notice? Michael seemed to be looking at us. That's right. His smile just now was so strange, as if he was responding to something. Impossible? Michael is in a small world. How could he see the barrage of comments? How is this possible? The barrage of comments exists in our time and space, unless Michael really has a god's perspective. Although the first person who asked the question sparked widespread discussion, most people thought it was impossible. However, what they couldn't guess was that I did see the barrage, and I really knew they existed. And more importantly, their existence became the key to my escape from Claire's control. I lowered my head and whispered, I didn't figure out any god's perspective. The reactions in the barrage rolled like a wave. He's talking. What did he say? The tone of his voice, just now, seemed like he was responding to us. This is crazy. This is definitely not a coincidence. I paused, my eyes soft but firm, and added in a low voice. Actually, it was you who saved me. A series of question marks popped up on the screen in an instant. What on earth is going on? Save him? Is he talking about us? This is impossible. How does he know we exist? Before I could explain further, the bullet screen suddenly stopped, and all the transparent words seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force and disappeared in an instant. The sounds, words, and light that existed around me were all emptied out, as if they had never appeared. And now, I am the only one left in this silent space. But it doesn't matter. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, because I knew that the next battle would be controlled by me. Claire's collapse had already begun, and I wanted to make her feel truly desperate. Chapter 18. The bullet screen suddenly disappeared, and the transparent words that had accompanied me for days disappeared in an instant. It was as if they had never existed, but just an illusory dream. The room fell silent, and I was the only one sitting there. I sighed softly and felt somewhat relieved in my heart. The barrage might be the catalyst for my awakening, but the real ending still needs to be written by myself. And now, I am waiting for Claire's last scene. 8 reincarnations. This farce carefully planned by Claire finally came to an end. She arrived as promised and knocked on the door. When she pushed the door open, she still had that familiar smile on her face, and she didn't seem to notice that I was any different from before. She handed me a thermos bottle and spoke softly, as if she was afraid of disturbing me. Michael, this is the chicken soup I made especially for you. I know you are very tired and have not slept well recently. Drink this and you will feel better. Her tone was sincere, even a little distressed, but I just felt extremely bored when I looked at her. She had obviously completely lost her sense of proportion and started to try all kinds of methods. And I was already tired of playing this role with her. Thank you. I took the thermos with a polite smile on my face, but I wasn't touched at all. Under her burning gaze, I slowly opened the bottle cap, shook it gently a few times, sniffed the aroma of the soup, and then threw it into the trash can next to me without hesitation. Bang! The sound of the thermos hitting the wall of the trash can was particularly clear in the quiet room. Claire's face froze instantly. She stood up in surprise and almost shouted, Michael, what are you doing? Don't you know how important this is to you? Important? I looked at her, smiled coldly, and asked calmly, what's in it? Her body suddenly stiffened, and her expression was almost frozen, but she quickly adjusted her expression and tried to squeeze out a fake smile. This is my love for you, Michael. Don't you love me anymore? For this bowl of soup, I stayed up all night. Can you at least taste it? Her tone was a little aggrieved and pleading, and there were even tears in the corners of her eyes. What a skilled performance. What a ridiculous trick. I couldn't help but laugh, but the laughter was full of coldness and sarcasm. I shook my head and interrupted her disguise. Claire, stop pretending. The mission failed. Do you have anything else to say? She was stunned, and I easily tore off the disguise on her face. A trace of panic flashed in her eyes, and she asked in a trembling voice, Mission? Michael, how did you know? I looked at her and gave her a mocking smile. What do you think? Do you think I will believe that the decline in favorability is just a system bug? Claire, do you think you can lie to me forever? She opened her eyes wide, as if she couldn't accept this fact at all. The next second, her emotions completely collapsed, and she could no longer maintain the gentleness she pretended to be. She screamed hysterically, "Since you know everything, don't blame me for being rude. You are honored to be my target, Michael. Now drink this bowl of chicken soup." She suddenly rushed towards me, trying to take back the thermos that was thrown into the trash can. But I was prepared, and I raised my leg coldly and kicked her to the ground. Claire struggled to get up, but the next moment her body seemed to have lost all strength, and she collapsed to the floor helplessly. A cold mechanical voice sounded, breaking the silence in the room. "Claire, stop struggling. Michael has exposed your identity. The mission failed, and the strategy is automatically terminated. You are out." She lay on the ground, her face as pale as paper, her eyes full of fear and despair. Her lips trembled slightly, and she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Chapter 20. This is the 5th year that Claire and I have exchanged lives. The scene of that day still lingers in my mind. Her hysterical screams, the system's prompts as cold as a knife, and the bursts of laughter coming from the depths of nothingness. These voices used to torment me night after night, waking me up in nightmares. However, time is a strange thing, and after a few years, it has worn those sharp memories into a blurred shadow, like a bizarre nightmare. And now, my life is completely different from the past. Claire's existence was completely wiped out from this world. No one remembered her. No one knew who she was. Even any traces she left behind were covered up without a trace. The only thing left is the wealth she bought with my life and price. The status, resources, everything she carefully woven, now all belonged to me. My life was so stable, it almost didn't seem real. I was finally living without the constant fear and cycle of pain. But even so, sometimes in the middle of the night, I still can't help but think of those scenes from the past. Those bullet comments, those memories of reincarnation, those heart-wrenching struggles. Did they really happen? Or is all this just my imagination, an extremely absurd dream? I thought the answers would never come. I thought I would carry these questions with me until the end of my life. Until one day, on a remote island, an unexpected conversation suddenly tore a hole in those sealed memories. It was a quiet evening, and I was walking along the beach. In the distance, 2 men were standing on the rocks, talking excitedly and loudly, totally unaware of my approach. Their tone was brisk and careless, but it was like a needle that suddenly pierced my nerves. One of the men said, "Didn't I tell you? That NPC named Claire is really easy to defeat. If you want to get the quest reward, just stick to her." The other man laughed, "Ha, yes. She is indeed good-looking, but her health is terrible. I heard that her family is also very poor. Do you know what her biggest characteristic is? If she feels wronged, she will cry. How can you capture her? It couldn't be easier. But," he added, "I think it's better to forget it. If it weren't for the fact that her strategy is easy to defeat, I wouldn't even want to touch her. To be honest, this kind of NPC is not interesting at all." Their laughter floated in the sea breeze, so lighthearted that it grated on my ears. My steps suddenly stopped. At that moment, everything around me seemed to be still. The wind stopped howling, and the waves stopped surging. I could hear my heartbeat beating in my ears again and again. Claire. Oh, Claire. The memories of the past suddenly came back like a breaking tide. Her eyes, her smile, her clumsy tricks, the layers of reincarnation. Everything became clear. I lowered my head and stood there in deep thought for a long time. So long that the wind began to blow in my ears again, and so long that their conversation gradually faded away. What is love in this world? It makes people follow each other through life and death. Then I whispered, "Good luck, Claire." These words seemed to be spoken to himself as well as to her.